Hey, what's up, everybody? Today, me and James will go back in time 25 years and talk about Pride 1. I'm here in Hawaii, but check it out.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Yamatodamashii podcast. Today, we're taking a trip back in time. We're going to go back 25 years because about 3 weeks ago, it was 25 years for the first ever Pride event. So, what we thought we'd do...
You know, it's funny. Funny you say that, 25 years. I want to say, oh, I was a young boy, but fuck, I wasn't that young still yet. I was already like 20-something, so...
That's still pretty young.
Yeah. Yeah, compared to now, I feel like that's a young stud. But okay, well, anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's cool. I mean, does 25 years? Does it feel like 25 years ago?
Not at all. Feels like maybe 8-9 years.
Wow. Okay. Cool. So yeah. So as I was saying, you know, what we're going to do today is kind of go back in time a bit. Enson's going to share his memories of the Pride event, where he was, but then also we're going to, you know, break down some of those fights, talk about what happened. And give some thoughts, and maybe there's some bits of insider info that you guys were keen to hear. So I was looking at the timeline for this one, just to see where you were in your career. And very interestingly, I could see that, you know, the first ever Pride event was obviously back in 1997. It was on October the 11th, which is a Saturday. And funnily enough, having a look at your record of career, you were actually fighting Joe Estes, an episode we already did. It was the rematch. It was for the SHOOTO Heavyweight Championship. That was on the next day, October the 12th, Sunday. So I was curious, were you ever asked by Pride to be part of the first show?
Yep. So about a couple months before the Pride show, I was actually giving me an offer for $10,000 to fight in Pride 1. No opponent was actually decided because they wanted to first asked if I was available, and my first thing was, yeah, hell yeah, because I was fighting in SHOOTO for like $2,000, and you know, Rickson was going to be fighting in the main event, and I knew Pride was going to be like the next big thing. Of course, my loyalty was at SHOOTO, so I was gonna I wanted to fight in Pride as a SHOOTO representative. You know, it wasn't like I'm going to switch over and become a Pride fighter. It was like, even till today, I was a SHOOTO champion fighting in Pride, you know. So that was the whole thing. And I was like, yeah, oh, yeah, hell yeah, I would love to. So I said, hold on, let me check with, you know, check my schedule, check my manager, check everything. And when I brought it to SHOOTO, they didn't want me to fight. So, you know, I was like, you know, this is a huge opportunity for me. I'm going to be representing SHOOTO. And, you know, they said they had a fight on that weekend. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I'd love to fight him, but man, I can fight in the next one, you know. And what the SHOOTO guys told me was that, how about if we make your rematch with Joe Estes a title fight? Because they wanted to, well, I don't know how that all went, because if they, you know, of course, you know that there wasn't much heavyweights in SHOOTO. Mm-hmm. So it'd be kind of weird to have a title match when you only have like 3 or 4 heavyweights in SHOOTO, and especially just me and Joe Estes pretty much fighting each other. And you know, I didn't know if they rushed the heavyweight match to try and entice me to come in to fight SHOOTO instead. So what they told me was, how about if we make it a title match? And when they said that, you know, for me, the first ever SHOOTO heavyweight, little did I know it was going to be first and only. But yeah, for me, it was the first ever. You know, you can remember, you know, there's always these champions, but you remember the first ever, you know, to become the champ. You know, so, you know, it's like, wow, okay, I would love to have that title. I would love to rematch Joe Estes to redeem myself. And it was actually where I thought, okay, if you guys are going to give me a title match, I'll not fight in Pride. So, you know, I felt that getting a rematch with Joe Estes, getting, you know, the title of the first ever SHOOTO champ, heavyweight champ, I mean, a world heavyweight champ, I felt like that outweighed, you know, the difference in financial gains that I would get fighting in Pride. So, yeah, I turned down Pride, and I decided to take the rematch with Show Estes. The interesting thing with that whole thing is that when 2 weeks before the fight was supposed to happen, Shooto called me and told me that they might not be able to get Joe Estes, which means it probably wouldn't be a title match. So it was a hard hit for me because, one, I couldn't get my revenge on Joe Estes, and two, the whole reason, one of the biggest reasons why I passed on Pride was because I wanted to become the first ever heavyweight world Shooto champion. And so that kind of pissed me off. And I asked him what I mean, I was pissed off at Shooto at first because it was like, do your job, man. You guys said you guys going to get him. You guys going to make a title match and do your job. And their reason was I love to get Joe Estes on the podcast because I want to see what the real reason was. Because, you know, promotions always lie to you. So I want to ask Joe Estes. And because they told me that Joe Estes was demanding too much money. He was saying that he beat me in the first fight. He should be paid more, which he has a point, but I don't know how much he was asking for. I don't know what the figures were. And, you know, for me, of course, as you know, I turned down more than 3 times the amount of fight money to fight in Pride. So for me, financial was not one of the big reasons why I chose to fight. So I told Shooto to, whatever you guys got to take out of my fight money, take it, give it to him, and just make sure he's here. And for me, it was like, yeah, okay, you can make more money, you'll take some of my money, but I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt you and make you pay for that. So that was my whole, you know, going into the fight. And if you listen to the podcast about, you know, the Joe Estes fight, I had a hard time restraining myself. It was just so much energy pent up. Not just was it a street fight to me, just the fact that Joe Estes talked a big story and tapped out right away. And, you know, it's just all that animosity, all that excitement, and all that adrenaline just put together was just something that I just couldn't. I had a hard time just stopping when the ref said to stop. So yeah, so that was the story behind that. And you know, I didn't. I guess it was right after my fight. You know, my parents were there, so I didn't even think of going to Pride. You know, I didn't even try to get tickets. I didn't. I watched it on TV. That's it.
Yeah. I'm guessing you're pretty busy the night before your big title fight, right? So it's probably lower priority than, you know, sorting your family out.
Yeah, you know, the interesting for me in my career is what I believed is the more sacrifice you make for a goal, when you finally obtain the goal, that's the amount of happiness and you know, elation that you'll feel in it. So, for example, if you totally, like, you know, don't even study for something, you pass the test, and it's like, oh, cool, I passed, you know. But if you strain and sacrifice all this nights out with the friends, you sat home, studied, when you pass the test, it's going to be like, yes, you know, it's going to, the sacrifices you made turns into happiness. So whenever I had fights, I always, you know, I fought unlimited weight, so I could eat whatever I wanted and gain whatever I wanted. But I felt one thing, I didn't want to put any food in my body that wouldn't help me fight and be stronger. And the second thing I thought was, I'm making sacrifices. I know one chocolate bar a week wouldn't hurt me, wouldn't even make any difference in my, you know, my power, my training, my you know, my performance in the ring on the fight night. But I made those sacrifices. Didn't go out at night to clubs. And, you know, of course, anything that was for pure enjoyment, just to enjoy myself, I gave up. And I did it on purpose. I didn't eat no junk foods. I didn't go out, have any fun. And I did it on purpose to create sacrifice to up the level of my happiness when I do perform well and win. So, yeah. So, of course, although, you know, night before the fight, you know, you're concentrating everything. But honestly, 3-4 hours out of the night, you can go out and watch a fight and enjoy, take your mind off the fight. That's possibly something that wouldn't have hindered my performance at all. But I did want to make that sacrifice and not go out at night and not go out and enjoy myself at the fights when I had to, you know, lay my life on the line the next day. So, yeah, so that was my whole idea about making sacrifices. So, of course, watching the Pride fight was something that I did not even entertain.
Nice. Yeah. Shows you dedication as a fighter, right?
Yeah.
Was there a lot of buzz around the event while you were at Shooto? Were people talking about it? Like, how much hype was sort of leading into the event back in 1997?
Yeah, well, you know, the undercard, there was really no buzz about it, but the whole big thing was Rickson GRACIE is coming to Japan.
Hmm.
You know, he just beat up Anjo when Anjo
Yeah.
did an invasion in the dojo. He just did that. You know, he Takada's the the higher up of Anjo.
Hmm.
It's the same association, and Takada's a huge name. Takada's a huge pro wrestler, which, you know, as you know, back in that day, the pro wrestling fighters, I don't want to call them fighters, the pro wrestling athletes,
Yeah.
uh, they had a way bigger following than fighters. So
Hmm.
that was huge, man. Just not just Rickson GRACIE himself. Takada definitely, his name pulled a lot of people. So it was a
Yeah.
huge fight.
And you touched on that infamous incident, right? About the whole Yoji Anjo, going to Brazil, calling out Rickson, Rickson locking the doors, them having this fight that was apparently recorded, and then Yoji Anjo actually bringing the like Japanese media as well, right? And then
Yeah, it was
Yoji.
actually in LA, in Rickson's gym in LA.
Oh, okay, my bad. Yeah, and what I mean, that's a pretty infamous incident. But what was the reception like in Japan when that happened? Because apparently it was in newspapers and that sort of thing. Is this something that you guys were talking about in the gyms and that sort of stuff?
Well, yeah, for me, especially because I considered myself at the time a GRACIE representative.
Mhm.
It was huge. I actually watched the video.
Oh wow,
They
you've
did
seen the video.
a closed press conference showing the video only to the press conference. That video has not been let out ever yet, which
Yeah,
I
right.
think it's about time he should let it out, because it was a cool video, man.
Yeah.
They went in and they locked the doors. They put all papers on the gym windows so no one could peek in. All the Japanese media, they left them outside. They only ran their own camera. The fight actually, you know, it was Anjo's a big guy, and Anjo's not someone that is he's a fighter. He knows how to
Mhm.
fight. Although he's a pro wrestler, he knows how to fight. So it went out of the mat into the area where people come and watch. Has like a wooden almost a wooden guardrail. It went over that,
Yeah.
and then it ended up in the middle of the mat where Rickson choked him out, knocked him out, and stepped on his head after he beat him.
Wow. That's
And
pretty
then he
cool.
goes straight to the door and opens the door for the media to walk in, to see Anjo bloodied on the mat, waking up. Classic, classic.
How did you see the tape?
They had a closed press conference in the SHOOTO gym,
Whoa. Wow. Okay.
and no one could video, no one could watch. I mean, all we could do is only the they call them kankesha. So anybody that's part of the media or part of SHOOTO could come in. So apparently I was part of SHOOTO, so they allowed me in, and I just stood there and watched it from the back of the room.
Wow, that's really cool. I mean, like barely anyone's seen that tape, right? So that's a pretty elite
Yeah,
group
I
to be able
think
to say you've seen it.
maybe the 15, 20 people that are in the room is the only people who've ever saw that tape.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. I wonder if it ever will get released.
It better. Rickson should, man. That's depriving the fight fans from something that is very historic, I
Yeah, it's
believe.
a valuable piece of MMA history, right? As we say, it sort of
Yes.
sets the scene for Pride One very nicely.
Yeah, it
Um,
did.
so we'll come back to the main event, but I want to start, talking about the overall card itself, and just to get your impressions on some of the fights. Maybe you've got some stories from some of the fighters as well. Interestingly enough, the person that actually opened the card was your old pro wrestling rival, Murakami. Uh, Murakami goes to face John DIXON. He actually gets a really nice judo throw and a submission. You obviously met Murakami later down the line. Did you guys ever discuss Pride One?
No, we never did. Never
Yeah.
did talk about it. But my background in Murakami, he's a judo guy.
Mm.
He doesn't have very good striking, and besides that, anybody that I believe has gotten into the MMA ring in that day and age is a freaking warrior.
Mm.
Regardless, DIXON had no ground, was definitely not an MMA fighter, but you got to give it to the fighters who's entered the ring in that day and age when MMA wasn't quite understood. So yeah, I mean, DIXON had no ground, and it was a typical back in the day. You know how the UFC was, is striker versus grappler. submission fighter versus striker, you know, wrestler versus karate. You know, it was one of those things that comparing the two different martial arts, because no one ever actually did full MMA, you know, training where they did hit all the three aspects of fighting. So it was a fight that you know, I believe it was in Murakami's favor.
Yeah.
And no one knew who John DIXON was, but Murakami had a pretty good name in Japan for his judo, and he already fought in like jacket jiu-jitsu and, you know, all these other different sort of MMA events that they had around Japan. So he was a decently well-known name in Japan.
And still going, still pro wrestling. I think he works for Pro Wrestling Noah from time to time, still putting in some of the events. It's crazy, right? How much of the Pride alumni are still doing pro wrestling. Fujita's still doing it. There's a few others sort of knocking about. So I'm waiting for your re-debut.
You know, pro wrestling people, the MMA fans will say, yeah, pro wrestling is fake, but you know what? Pro wrestling is fake in only certain aspects. Like if you wanna just exclude where you're calling fake, MMA is fake. Because all these guys that talk shit and then hug each other after the fight, that's so totally fake.
Yeah.
You know, so pro wrestling, you know, the falls are real. The kicks to the chest are real. You know, the matches, and of course, you already decided who's going to win and lose and how they're going to win and lose. So if you want to say it's not a real fight, yeah, I agree with you. But as far as everything else, man, it's a hard sport, and the fact that Murakami and Fujita are still doing it shows their durability, man. I did pro wrestling for 1 year, and I tore my groin, which was one of the worst injuries I've ever had in my sports career ever. Pro wrestling's tough, man.
Yeah. Yes, it is a toll on the body, right? So
yeah, it is.
And hey, pro wrestling is going to be a bit of a theme on this card, right? Because there's plenty of affiliation with pro wrestlers. There's probably at least about 5 or 6, maybe 7 on the card. So they've got some sort of tie. But as we move down the card, the next one up was Big Daddy Goodridge versus Oleg Taktarov in a pretty violent fight. I'll let you break down this one. Well, what did you think of this fight?
Typical grappler striker event again. I mean, fight again. Yeah, it was Gary Goodridge. The longer he keeps it standing, the more chances of him winning. The sooner and more control Oleg can take on the ground, it's all his game. You know, Gary had almost no ground, and Oleg's standing was very, very sketchy. And for me, the percentage was I thought that Oleg was actually going to finish off Gary. But man, and you saw that fight, that punch that Gary hit him with, and then I love it how Gary, you know, Gary is, I think, thinks like me, where it's a kill or be killed thing. It wasn't a sport; it was a street fight. So of course, you know, the guy looks like he's out, but why take that chance? Give him a couple more shots, and you know, Gary hits like a ton. He's one of the ex-world heavyweight arm wrestling champions, which shows how much power he has, and he hits like a truck. So, you know, I mean, with Oleg being out cold on the ground and taking those last 2 shots, it wasn't little pitter-patter shots. It was huge shots, man. I'm surprised, you know, Oleg is still around today doing movies and, you know, enjoying his life.
Yeah. I mean, well, what I didn't realize, right, because I'd always seen the American version of the show, the one that's on Fight Pass with the American commentary that's sort of pre-recorded. I managed to get a copy of the Japanese version, which has kind of got like all the intermissions, the live bands they had playing there and everything. What I didn't realize is that Oleg actually gets carted off on a stretcher after that fight. So he was in really bad shape. Yeah, so once he got knocked out, he was actually on a stretcher, and he did not look in like good condition at all. So that one shocked me. But yeah, it was interesting to see the sort of uncut version.
I love that because that showed the how do you say it? What word am I looking for? The severity and the ferocity of MMA. What you know, what it really was. It wasn't really a sport. It was like kill or be killed, man.
Super risky, especially, you know, with the rule set being the way it was. We move forward in the show. next up was Akira Shoji versus Renzo Gracie. And obviously Rickson was such a big deal, right? With his performances in Vale Tudo. How much was known really about Renzo?
Well, Renzo wasn't really that known at the time in Japan, but of course with the name Gracie, already, yeah, he was a very talked about. It was a very looked forward fight. And Shoji's just one tough motherfucker. He's just tough as hell. And Shoji's not someone that has no idea how to fight. He knows how to fight. So, good stamina. He's pudgy and everything, but he can keep going. And for me, Renzo won that fight. I mean, of course, the rules were finish or draw.
Yeah.
But Renzo totally controlled it. He's the one who got near submissions. And what Shoji did really well, that looked like some people might even look at him as Shoji winning the fight because he was supposed to lose. Just the fact that he got out of submission, just the fact that he survived Renzo on his back. That already, because of the favoritism of how good Renzo was, that already was a victory in itself. So people tend to look, if you look at the two fighters that are neutral and you don't have anybody that's supposed to win or lose, Renzo controlled that whole fight. I mean, even when Shoji got on top of him towards the end, he didn't do nothing with it. He didn't threaten Renzo in any way. But when you think that, Renzo was supposed to kill this guy and he can't submit him, he gets out of the armbar, he gets out, come off the back, it's like, whoa. And all of a sudden you have this weird feeling that, wow, Shoji's doing super good when all he's doing is surviving.
Yeah.
So that's the interesting thing about that is, just surviving fighting a Gracie already was a total merit, is a victory in itself. So I think that fight, Shoji got a lot of props because how tough he was and the fact that Renzo couldn't submit him.
Yeah, it's exactly that, right? That's kind of what sort of built fan interest in Shoji. Is that showing that heart that he had in that fight, and then we see it like later down in his career, right? With all these fights, that it's all about people think Shoji's out, and then he gets out the submission. So it's a good sort of opening chapter to his career, right?
Pure demonstration of Yamatodamashii.
Yes, yeah. So after that, we actually had a live music performance, which I've never seen until I watched the Japanese broadcast, which it went on for quite a while. But it just showed the sort of stage that it was at. I mean, this show was at the Tokyo Dome. I don't know, was it a sold-out crowd? Was it a sellout? No idea.
Yeah. I have no idea.
It looked pretty packed, put it that way. So,
I think I would, if I had to guess, I would think it would be because the reason why they went to the Tokyo Dome was probably because they needed more seats. Tokyo Dome can fit 80,000 people.
Wow.
And with Takada's name, and pro wrestling alone fills arenas like that in Japan.
Right.
So with the MMA fans mixed in because Rickson's coming, with Takada's name, oh my God! I mean, I would be surprised if you told me the event wasn't sold out.
Yeah. No, it definitely looked like a sellout. But I mean, after the music performance, we then had Koji Kitao, rest in peace, a former sumo wrestler / pro wrestler. He actually was facing Nathan Jones, who had a brief stint in the WWF at the time. A really quick fight, pretty much straight away gets him down. We see Koji getting the arm lock. But I just wondered if you had any thoughts on Koji Kitao.
Yeah, Kitao was a yokozuna in sumo, very famous sumo, and I don't care what people think. They say fat guys pushing themselves in the ring, that kind of stuff. I don't care what you say, man. Sumo is hardcore.
Yeah,
they get heavy because they need that base around their power. They're forced to eat because without the weight, it's so much harder to move other bigger opponents, carry them out. It prevents them from, carrying you out. And I myself personally went to Konishiki and Musashi Maru's sumo bear and actually trained and mixed with the boys, and let me tell you, man, I have a newfound respect for sumo after going there, and you know, for Kitao to be a yokozuna, I don't care what you say. I don't care. He looks like he can't fight. He's very immobile. He's an ex-pro wrestler. To become a yokozuna, or even even the any higher rank, Komusumi, Sekiwaki, Ozeki, any of those higher ranks in sumo, you're a tough motherfucker, you know. So Kitao, you know, he's definitely a tough guy. And you know, the again, it was like someone who kind of sort of knew how to fight but was tough, which in Kitao, to someone who was just a big dangerous boy. You know, any big boy that, you know, can punch, if you get hit by someone as big as what's his guy's name was?
Nathan Jones.
Nathan Jones. Anyone as big as Nathan Jones, man, it's going to hurt. So, you know, Nathan Jones had that threat of that big punch. But as far as the ground, Kitao's key lock was horrible. Nathan Jones could have extended his arm, sucked his elbow in. There was so many escapes for him. But, you know, apparently Juan Kitao didn't know how to do the move. And he was lucky that Nathan Jones had no idea how to get out of key lock. And, you know, that submission in nowadays would not even be a near submission.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that it was a very low level fight, but very entertaining.
Yeah, that's right. It was quick. It was over pretty quick, but as you say, it was an entertaining fight. And yeah, I mean, with Koji Kitao, it's kind of, his look is very unique, right? The build is just something you wouldn't see that now in MMA these days, right? But even his attire was completely unique. I wasn't sure what he was wearing. The sort of like
he just got out of bed. He just got out of bed. Didn't have time to change.
Pajamas. Yeah.
Yes, his pajamas, man. He fought in pajamas. What a stud.
Yeah, man. He looked vicious as hell in his pajamas. That's for sure. So yeah, that was funny. Oh wow, this next fight. One bad motherfucker to another bad motherfucker in Branko CIKATIC, I can never say his name, was fighting Ralph White. And things, you know, got a bit interesting in terms of the rule set. Was this a kickboxing bout? I think
it was kickboxing rules.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Right. Yeah, it's just because it had the, you know, the small gloves. But the Branko, if you guys haven't seen it or haven't seen it in a while, Ralph White goes down and Branko throws basically a soccer kick that kicks Ralph White outside the ring. Ralph White comes in with the biggest knot on his head, also falls down as he's getting in the ring, and it gets called a no contest. But I mean, Branko was he one of the scariest dudes to face back then?
Yeah, he was straight up a gangster, man. I mean, straight up, not this kind of Conor McGregor gangster, but a real gangster, you know. So, you know, with the mixture of Branko CIKATIC coming in with that hardcore attitude and hardcore personality, being a real gangster dude in an MMA ring, in a kickboxing match, but everything around you is MMA, you're already asking for something wrong to happen in that, you know. So, I mean, already alone, I think Broncos has that same mentality as I did, where it wasn't a sport, it was a street fight. See your opponent go down, the excitement of being able to possibly put out the guy who's coming to try and hurt you is just such a rush that it's hard to control yourself. And, you know, being in a, you know, kickboxing match where it's against the rules, but
yeah,
fight before that, fight after that is MMA. I mean, it's easy to get into it. All those things combined, you know, Branko being who he is, you know, it's a tough one to control. So, you know, I mean, for me, the hematoma looked bad, but it looked worse back in that day because people didn't understand those things. I mean, you have that happen in nowadays.
Yes, you do.
Like,
yeah.
Look at Joanna when she fought Wei Li.
Yeah.
Her whole forehead was huge, you know, and they let the fight continue. So that little hematoma looked like an egg was pushed under her skin. That was real gross looking, and you still see it today in fighting every now and then. But it's never ever stopped the fight. You know, of course, I don't know if it so happened to really hurt White in a way that where he actually fell down, or he was, you know, decided he didn't want to fight, so he purposely fell down. You know, that's only Ralph would know that. But
Yeah.
for me, my guess was that it's not that bad of an injury to stop a fight. But of course, they had no education back then about MMA. They never saw that type of injuries, so it was something that kind of, I think, freaked everybody out. I mean, even Boss
Yeah.
Luton was kind of freaked out. You know, I heard Boss
Yeah.
Luton's commentary, the English commentary, and Boss Luton is another bad motherfucker. You know, but he kind of freaked out at that too. So it's like, whoa, okay. If Boss is freaking out, 99% of the normal person watching the fight is going to freak out too. You know.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that Baz Rutten commentary was Phil added in later, I think. I don't think they were there live, him and Stephen Quadros, because I think isn't it it's either in that Pride event or one of the early Pride events where you can see Baz cornering a fighter and he's talking about himself. He's he's doing the
Really? I didn't
commentary,
know
but you
that.
can hear him. So I think they added it in
Wow,
later.
that's not fair, man. You can be a super good commentator knowing the outcome.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. So I think that's just something that they did later down the line. But yeah, I mean, it's like you say, Branko was a really accomplished kickboxer. I mean, he won the first K1 back in, I think, 93. So he knows how to kickbox. He knows the rules. So it's like you say, that sort of gangster mentality takes over, sees this crazy rule set and thinks, hey, let's give it a go myself. And wham bam,
I
soccer
wonder if
kicks.
Branko was, I think Branko is the type of guy that loves that type of MMA fights, but of course, because it was kickboxing rules, and I wonder if he was during the whole event watching the fights and watching the rule, going to the rules meeting and seeing that, okay, just this fight is different, but the other fights, yeah, you can soccer ball kick. I wonder if there was this like envy and this idea like, damn, I want to fight that. And when he had that chance, like maybe he felt that everything else is MMA. Maybe I can get away with this little kick in the head, So
Yeah, who knows? It's crazy, but yeah, it's certainly entertaining. Certainly a piece of the history of Pride One. Yeah, a good way to start soccer kicks, right? Considering it kind of became what Pride everyone loved about Pride, right?
yeah.
Moving on, Kurosawa, a famous karate fighter, went against the Dutch Igor Meindert. I don't know if I've said that right. Bit of a strange fight, ended up in an injury. It actually turned out that Kurosawa had quite like a long-term injury from this fight. I think he had to have several knee surgeries just to repair the knee, but he you can see he definitely was trying to fight on it, right? So when he's going in for the fight, he kept coming back.
Yeah, he was he is a warrior, man. I mean, he you could see his leg bending backward, like hyperextending when he put the wrong angle on the weight on it. I think his ligament was completely torn.
Mm-hmm.
And that guy just ignored the pain, ignored the fear of what happening to his knee, and just fought through it. Amazing, man. That he actually passed.
Yeah, I saw that.
Suddenly passed, which is so sad. I mean, I remember when he passed long ago. He wanted to meet me. He wanted to come and talk to me, and I wanted to meet him, seeing how he fought through that knee injury. But unfortunately, it never happened. But yeah, that was like crazy. That showed like how much more tough can you get, man?
Yeah, yeah. It was impressive. I mean, we were just talking about TJ Dillashaw the other day with the shoulder popping out, but the knee. Can you imagine the knee with the possibility of getting leg kicks thrown at it? And it's your base, right? So it's just screws up everything. I'm guessing.
In that day and age, they actually allowed that to continue. TJ Dillashaw's shoulder is a little different because the shoulder is not as drastic. Of course, it's probably as painful, but it's not. I mean, that knee was hyperextending backwards to a point where he would fall to the ground when he put the weight in the wrong area.
Yeah.
So, this day and age, that fight would have been stopped. But back in the day, it shows that primitiveness of what MMA was back in the day. Like, they didn't even stop that from happening. They let it go. It's like, whoa.
Super tough fighters back then to be a part of it, to say the least. Switching gears though, we moved to Kimo versus Dan Severn. I remember the first time I watched this fight, and it was not how I thought it would go, given the people involved in the fight. But I mean, give me your thoughts on this fight. I mean, the crowd, it's very rare you hear Japanese fans booing, right? But at the end of the fight, you certainly hear it. For those that don't know, it's a 30-minute draw. Another one that goes the time distance, and not a massive amount happens in the fight.
Yeah, I mean, as a typical fan that you don't understand the fear of being in the ring, the techniques of each individual kick or punch, you know, entertainment wise, it was a horrible fight. But when you watch the fight, I watched it just recently, and you know, Dan Severn poses some danger. He's a big boy. He doesn't strike properly, but I definitely guarantee you his strikes would hurt, being as big as he is. Kimo knows how to punch and kick, but of course, because he was so afraid of the takedown, he didn't really get to sit on him. So with the whole idea of wrestler versus striker, and you know the scariness of what MMA was back in that day, you know that. I mean, I was watching it thinking when I first heard about it, or I didn't even want to watch the fight because it looked so boring.
Right.
But when I did watch it, you know, there's some couple leg kicks that Kimo threw that was like heavy leg kicks. They missed each other with some punches that were pretty dangerous punches, you know. So there was a element of danger in that. And if you're just looking for excitement or like a throwdown or a submission, it was boring. But if you're watching every nitty-gritty detail and understanding the tension and anxiety being in there, it wasn't boring to me when I watched it the second time. Knowing what Severn can do, knowing what, you know, how big these boys are, knowing what one punch could do. Watching the fight, it was a pretty interesting fight. You know, Kimo threw some nice leg kicks. When he threw a punch, he really tried to hurt him. So, you know, the fight, I think the booing definitely, what booing actually is when you're booing an MMA fight, it almost shows your intelligence in the technique of the art. You know, you have the reason why the Japanese fans are so different now. You know, they cheer when you pass guard because they understand the technique and they understand the advance in position. They understand the difficulties of advancing in position. But, you know, the American crowd is, I say, not as educated as the Japanese crowd because all they want to see is punches. They want to see submissions. And even till today, you go to a UFC and if they're not, you know, I just watched the last UFC where I forget who it was. It had him pinned on the cage. They actually started booing. I mean, it was like, it's such a crazy, you know, to pin someone in the cage is super hard. You know, to not get hurt while you're pinning, to not get, you know, hurt while you're being pinned. And there's so much technique involved, some of the stuff that they boo at because there's no striking or no one's getting punched in the face, you know?
Yeah. I know the fight you mean. It was one of the ones on the recent UFC where it was like a really good fight and then they like pause momentarily up against the cage or something and then the crowd just started shitting all over them. It was like, these guys are fighting their ass off.
Yeah, it was like they're booing.
Yeah, that one, caught me off guard as well.
I think it was in 280. It was one of the fights in 280.
Yeah, it was on the main card, I remember, but I just can't think which one it was.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, going back to guys in the fight, is Kimo someone you know at all? I mean, he's from your side of the world, right?
I don't know him personally because I know he's from Hawaii, but he lived in LA.
Right, okay.
I never got to meet him, but hopefully one day I get to meet him. He's definitely one of the legends of the sport, man. You know, he didn't take any titles or really make a big impact later on in the sport. But I don't care what you say. Anybody who's been in UFC 1, 2, 3, or 4, you know, even like the first 5 UFCs, man, I have utmost respect for him. And, you know, maybe my career did go bigger and I got bigger fights and I had a bigger name. I don't care what. You know, anybody, even someone like DIXON, who's not a very accomplished fighter. I mean, 100% respect for any fighter who stepped in that ring back in the old school days. I mean, you gotta. I mean, technique wise, maybe some of them were not. You know, like UFC 2, I think had some, or UFC 1, in fact, had some real horrible guys that had absolutely no ground.
Yeah.
And but one glove boxer, I forget his name, but I met him too.
Oh,
But
Is it Art Jimison?
Art Jimerson, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, legend. I mean, he was a horrible MMA fighter, but there was no such thing as an MMA fighter. There was strikers fighting in a cage with MMA rules. So, you know, for them to just even get in the ring, I mean, 100% respect for those guys. There's nothing more that I can say that every single fighter in the early days of the MMA. I mean, I'm talking early days, earlier than me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 100% respect for that.
Yeah. Interestingly, on Tapology, it actually lists that Kimo is supposed to fight Tank Abbott. Is that something you'd heard before? I've never heard that before.
When was that? In what?
So instead of Dan Severn, I think it might have been supposed to be Tank Abbott, but I don't know whether Tank got injured or got more money from the UFC or something, or maybe Tapology's just got it wrong. But if any of our listeners know, please enlighten us, because I'd never heard of that before as well.
I might have heard of it, but I probably don't remember. But Dan Severn is someone who takes matches in a day.
Yeah.
He would fight back-to-back weekends. So I wouldn't be surprised if Dan Severn actually stepped in on late notice for Tank Abbott. Yeah, so
Dan's got a bit of
I don't know for sure, but if you guys know, comment, let us know.
Yeah. Dan, I was just gonna say Dan's got a bit of a dodgy reputation though, right? For some of those fights that he's taken last minute. But
yeah. Dan is a pure entertainer.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a tough guy. I mean, I'm not saying that he's not a good fighter. He's a good fighter, but he's an entertainer. You go see him, watch, when we went to the Hall of Fame, there was a Hall of Fame event expo in Syracuse, New York. When I went to it, Dan Severn was one of the guys there. He was a total professional. Everybody's like, charging, I mean, everybody's like shaking hands, and everything you had to do with Dan, you had to pay. Total businessman. He knows how to market himself. Smart guy, super smart in business. Guys like me and Don Fry, like, we're just doing shit for free, and lesson learned was, Dan Severn had a good way to teach us fighters that, hey, don't underprice yourself. Don't make you sacrifice your life and your body for this. Make something of some financial gains from it. Dan Severn, 100% awesome businessman.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And finally, the main event: Rickson Gracie versus Takada. Going into this fight, it was obviously something that you probably talked about with your peers, as you say, representing Gracie Jiu-Jitsu at the time. What was the feeling like around fighters in terms of this? Because when people look back on this in hindsight, everyone's like, Rickson Gracie was obviously always going to destroy Takada. Was that the feeling though back in '97? Was it something that was maybe known with fighters, or was it, did the general public have a different perception perhaps than people on the inside? I'm just curious to know, sort of going into the fight, how people thought the fight would play out.
Well, I think everyone knew Takada was a pro wrestler. Everyone knew how good the Gracies were. And what I mean by everyone is everyone besides the Japanese fans.
Okay.
Because, there's this real weird misunderstanding, I want to say, that, pro wrestlers are super good fighters. Granted, you do have good fighters, Kanehara, Sakuraba, Anjo, these guys that come out of pro wrestling, there's some freaking good fighters, but, vice versa, because you're a good MMA fighter doesn't mean you're going to be a good pro wrestler. Because you're a good pro wrestler doesn't mean you're going to be a good MMA fighter. And Takada was one of them that was a famous, huge pro wrestler, but not a very good fighter. And everybody knew that. I'm sure Takada even knew that. But, for the Japanese fans, it was like, yeah, I think there's a lot of fans in Japan that thought it was the opposite way, where Takada's going to destroy Rickson. But all of us who knew who Rickson was, all of us knew about pro wrestling. Like, I'm biased because I was a Gracie representative, and Rickson was a personal friend. Well, I idolized him, but he was like a personal friend because I was close to his brother, Helson. For me, it was a no-brainer. It was absolutely a no-brainer. It was like straight up, Takada has no chance. You know, and back in that day, I was a little brainwashed on the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and that front thrust kick I thought was actually all you needed for striking. I wasn't a striker myself. Watching that fight now, Rickson's striking was so susceptible to getting hit.
Yeah.
In this day and age, I mean, this is not fair to Rickson, because in this day and age, if you put that Rickson in the ring right now, he wouldn't be able to win.
Yeah.
But that Rickson in this day and age wouldn't be that Rickson, because he would, as smart as Rickson is, he would have trained his wrestling, he would have trained his striking.
Mm-hmm.
And he would have been very adequate in all those things, you know. So it's unfortunate that we didn't get to see Rickson Gracie progress as a mixed martial artist. But yeah, it was a no-brainer, man. Besides the brainwashed pro wrestling Japanese fans, Takada had no chance. Takada had no chance. I mean, I would, even if they gave me odds of 1,000,000 to 1, I wouldn't bet on Takada.
Wow.
I would be wasting my $1.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, right? Because it's, as you say, like, the Japanese fans definitely must have been in favor, thinking that Takada was going to do this, because as soon as Rickson gets the submission, the air kind of goes out the Tokyo Dome, and it's a very different reaction, right? Like, considering, I guess it surprised me because of seeing some of the old Valley Tudo shows and seeing Rickson, go through those tournaments. But I guess just, it's not as well known as you say. Pro wrestling was the big thing back then.
Well, you got to understand, it was Takada.
Right.
This big pro wrestling hero. So it wasn't just a pro wrestler. It was Takada, Takada.
Yeah.
No, Takada, Rickson, who's that? Takada, oh yeah, Takada's going to kick his ass, Everyone, that's why I say the brainwashed pro wrestling fans.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty close to brainwashed.
Yeah. Wow. We learned a lesson that day, to say say the least. So, but yeah, I mean, that pretty much wraps up the event. Was there any other thoughts you had on the overall side of things?
Well, I loved it. I loved the event. I loved what Pride was doing. It was an entertainment circus show, man. I mean, mixed in with the true blood and grit of MMA. You got huge guys fighting each other, no weight classes, absolutely, almost back in the day, almost no rules. I mean, it was exciting, and I definitely saw that and thought, man, and I was a SHOOTO representative fighting in the SHOOTO ring, but I also did have that desire of actually being able to fight in Pride one day. And, for me, it was one of my goals to represent SHOOTO in the Pride ring.
Nice. Yeah. And spoiler alert for future episodes, you do get to Pride. So we'll cover off that when we get to that chapter. But I mean, for everyone watching, please let us know what you thought about this episode, doing a recap of Pride 1. If you like it, maybe we'll do Pride 2. And maybe we'll go back to some of the other historic MMA events and cover them and get Enson's memories and thoughts on these type of events.
Yeah, so let's do it. And everyone share this, man. Let everyone know that we're doing a podcast in this out, because I'm sure there's a lot of interest in what we talk about. But damn, 380 views on it, man. What the hell, man?
Yeah, I mean, a running joke between me and Enson is his Japanese channel with hundreds of thousands of views and this channel with hundreds of views. So if anything that people can do to help, please do, because it would appreciate it. It's YouTube's a funny world, man. It's a funny world to get your content out there and get people watching videos. So we appreciate all the tips. We'll keep trucking. We'll keep
like,
going.
share, and subscribe.
All right. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you guys again soon.
Pride 1. Wow. Memories, man. Well, anyway, everyone, subscribe, like, and share. Right on. Thanks for joining.